Recorder. Thank you, everybody, for your presence. Greetings from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome to the 7th seminar in the series Crop to Hunger, Case Studies in Africa and Beyond, supporting CGIAR partners through genotyping services. In our previous seminar, we had Patrick Obum presenting updates on the breeding and genetics of cowpea in West Africa. And once again, it was a great presentation. So today we have with us Dr. Claudia Teixeira Guimarães, sorry. So Dr. Claudia has a degree in agronomy, a master degree in genetics and plant breeding, and a PhD in genetics and plant breeding from the Federal University of Viçosa. So she has been a researcher at Embrapa Corn and Sorghum since 1999, working in areas of gene and QTL mapping, genome sequencing, and marker-assisted breeding, with an emphasis on biotic and abiotic stress tolerance. So she's also a professor and advisor for the graduate program in genetics at the Federal University of Minas Gerais since 2005, and in bioengineering at the Federal University of São Paulo, Del Rey, since 2010. So with a huge number of publications, she participated in the discovery of the first sorghum functional marker in sorghum. And after a brief talk about maize, she will introduce Gloria. So thank you very much, Dr. Claudia, for accepting this challenge and giving us the opportunity to listen from you. Thank you.
Well, Anna, thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, and for everyone. It's a nice pleasure for being here. Thanks, Anna. It's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Gloria Adu, a senior research scientist and plant breeder at Savannah Agricultural Research Institute in Ghana, CGIAR, SARI in Ghana. She will talk to us about advances in breeding climate resilient maize varieties for West Africa and West and Central Africa, a review of current tools available to plant breeders. Well, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Gloria. She got her PhD in plant breeding from Kwame Krumah University of Science and Technology. She's a current head of maize breeding program, and she is responsible to develop, release, and commercialize over 17 maize varieties, which are currently in Ghana maize production industry. She also leads several research programs and projects from AGRA, from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, World Bank, Africa Development Bank, and German Agency for Industrial Cooperation. Well, as Anna already introduced me, thanks. I am Claudia. I am a molecular geneticist at Embrapa Maize and Sorghum in Brazil. Well, just to introduce the challenge to breed in the case maize and all other crops to be cultivated in tropical regions, which combines several stresses like low pH soil, low mineral availability, essential nutrients such as P, phosphorus, excess of mineral, toxic minerals such as aluminum in acid soils, drought, diseases. So acid soils represents over this red map, over approximately 50% of arable lands in the world. And human activities, I just came from an acid soils meeting in China last month, and several scientists, soil scientists and environmental scientists, they are their common idea is that acid soils is increasing by human activities. And it is really in a faster track than the natural causes of aluminum, of acidity. So this soil was,
Claudia,
yes.
sorry to interrupt you. Can you put the presentation slide? And I'm not sure if you are advancing with the slides or not, please.
It's advancing.
So we are seeing the several slides. Yeah, and we didn't
Oh
the
no,
previous one.
right now it's only one.
Yeah, so now it's small and it says maize production in Brazil. So we were just
Yes,
in
but
the
it's
first
still
slide.
small.
Yeah.
Let's stop sharing.
Okay.
I think she needs to put in a slideshow.
Yeah, slideshow, yes.
Yeah, but it's already in a slideshow. Let me just unshare this. I will stop sharing and try to share it again.
Thank you, Claudia. I'm sorry for this.
No, thank you. Oh.
Yes, now it's okay.
Oh, it's okay now?
Yes, it's in the multiple stresses at tropical regions slide.
Okay, yeah. That's where it should be. Well, just to show you kind of the challenge for developing any crop for production in tropical regions, which combine several stresses. And in addition to all mineral availability, high or low, drought diseases, the acid soils occupies a large proportion of arable lands and is increasing by human activities. And the soil modification causes irreversible CO2 losses to the atmosphere that would increase the climate change problem. And is natural or human activity is increasing. The acid soils, ionic forms of aluminum, limits root development that will even amplifies the problem generated by drought and other mineral availabilities. So in Brazil, just to show you a little example, our Cerrado is this central area, occupies over 23% of the area, Brazilian area, but it's responsible for 50 to 70% of the agriculture. Our cropping system is divided in 2 seasons. The first season, it's the rainy season, but the 70% of maize is produced in the second season, which is very prone to drought. And it's cultivated mostly in the Cerrado biome. So this biome also share, it's really similar to African savanna. The landscape is very similar, and also it holds large biodiversity that it's important, and also an important source for fresh water, and needs to be preserved. So to develop cultivar more resilient to multiple stresses would be important target for breeding programs, which should be associated with conservative agronomic practices. We will combine aluminum tolerance to improve maize stability on acid soils, which is a large proportion of our land. Maize, the maize has a mate gene, which also cousin of the sorghum mate, which is a citrate transporter that expresses the root tip. That exudates citrate and chelates aluminum and avoid aluminum to get into the cell, to the root. So This aluminum tolerance gene improves the root growth under nutrient solution and under soil. This is a rhizobox. And we got yield improvement in grain yield on either control. This is a acid, corrected the acid soils, and this red is highly acidic soils cultivated in 2 years. This red shows dry spells at the end of maize cycle. This red button, this red boxes here. So the hybrids, maize hybrids carrying, this was introduced by market assisted selection, carrying the tolerant allele of ZM8 improved significantly the maize yield over 20 to 40%, depending on the combination of water availability and acid soils, the presence of aluminum toxicity in the soil. So we go from gene to results in the field and showing that the aluminum tolerance can improve maize yield stability on acid soils. Of course, it has to have aluminum in the, or at least in the deep, because corrected soil can also be improved the yield under water stress, because this probably the root in the deep would grow and absorb more water and nutrients. So this is our current work. We are introducing this allele to maize elite limes, and this is an important trait to follow when you have acid soils. And in addition to acidic soils, in addition to the whole problem that we already faces, the changes in maize yield by 2080 can be really modified when you increase 1, 2 to almost 5 centigrade in temperature. So, I mean, the target today of this speech from Dr. Gloria, it's really important breeding program developing climate resilient maize varieties. So please, Gloria, the talk is with you. I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you again. And I will turn off I will mute myself and stop my video. And Gloria, please.
Thank you, Claudia. Gloria, are you able to share your screen, please? Yeah. Thank you. Please put in present mode.
Okay. Is it okay, please?
Not yet, Gloria.
Okay.
Yes. Just need to go to the first slide.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Claudia, for the introduction, and then also for giving a preview to my presentation. As you said, most of the things you presented about what is happening in Brazil can be related to what is happening in West and Central Africa. And for that matter, builds the foundation for this presentation. My name is Gloria Boachua Edu. I work for the Savannah Agricultural Research Institute, which is part of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in Ghana. My presentation will be on the advances in breeding climate resilient maize varieties for West and Central Africa. It's actually a review of current tools available to plant breeders. So maize is a very important staple crop in Africa, in the whole world. In Ghana, it's one of the major staples that are used by humans and also for the poultry farm. And it's the same for most countries in West and Central Africa. Maize being a staple crop, its production and productivity is very key, and it is strategic to the food security of these nations. But as climate change advances, it comes with a lot of problems and stresses that affect maize production by reducing the yield of maize varieties and therefore not making the crop being competitive. And in some cases, affecting the ability of farmers and then the country as a large to be food secure. When climate change occurs, which is ongoing and has been predicted to affect agriculture, in Africa, the major stresses that are key and that is impacting maize production is the recurrence of droughts. We have heat, waterlogging, salinity, cold temperatures, disease, and pests. In West Africa, droughts and disease and pests, as well as heat, is very key and is one of and are the major concerns for most breeding programs. These stresses causes a lot of yield reduction because in most cases they occur together, and yield reduction could be as high as 85 to 100% if these stresses occur simultaneously. As Dr. Claudia was presenting earlier, increases in temperature affects climate variability, and it also affects maize production. Temperature and other activities that causes high emission of carbon dioxide and causes a lot of green gas problems also affects agricultural productivity. But even though Africa, we don't have a lot of issues or we don't produce a lot of carbon emissions, the impact of climate change is projected to be very severe in Africa more than in other countries. And this is because climate change is going to increase food production. But on the reverse side, Africa will need more food because our population is projected to increase at a very large rate. And then also, there's going to be a lot of increase in urbanization, which will reduce rural population, which implies that most of the farmers that we have today will not be farmers in the near future, and they will depend on rural folks to feed them. And as food production systems are not resilient, then it will be difficult to be able to feed a more rising population. It is very important to note that West and Central Africa, as has already been said, is in the savanna ecology. I brought in this map to show the countries that are within this sub-region. So let me start by pointing to my own country, Ghana, and then the biggest of the countries, Nigeria, that do a lot of maize production, and then also has a lot of impacts when it comes to maize productivity. We have all the other more drier environments around the Niger, and some are even more drier and more exposed to climate variabilities. Climate resilient crop varieties are just crop varieties or crops in general that possesses the inherent ability or an enhanced ability to withstand both biotic and abiotic stresses. So in West Africa and in Central Africa, as I said earlier, we have a key interest in stresses like droughts. If you look at these pictures for figure A, it's just showing a drought-tolerant variety as against one that is not drought-tolerant. And here, a heat-tolerant variety as against another that is not tolerant. And this picture also shows a water-lodging variety, tolerant variety as against another that is not tolerant. So in this instance, if a farmer is not cultivating a climate resilient variety, early maturing variety, drought-tolerant variety, and the farmer's field is hit by drought, this is what's a typical picture that a farmer will see. And this goes to show that yield reduction will be very high. This is very key because the emphasis on climate resilience is very key for West Africa and Central Africa because most of our food systems are based on natural and biosystems. And we use less of advanced mechanisms and agricultural farming practices. And therefore, as breeders, we have to be able to come out with varieties and technologies that will give these farmers more resilience. Through my research, and when I was doing this review, I came across this information, which I decided to share. So it is interesting to know that climate resilient maize varieties have the potential to increase yield by 5 to 25% in Africa. And since 2007 to 2015, about 330 climate resilient varieties has been released by research to farmers. And these releases and improvements were under the CGIAR initiative, under the then drought-tolerant maize for Africa project, which has moved into the other phase as stress-tolerant maize for Africa. Here, these varieties have been able to impact and change the lives of about 53 million individuals in Sub-Saharan Africa, including major countries in West and Central Africa, like Nigeria, Ghana, and then the others. So with these varieties, maize production areas have increased across these countries. In the same way, the economic impacts and value of cultivating maize has also increased. I will say and use Ghana as an example. As we speak now, the most dominant hybrid maize variety that was released by the local research institution is a stress-tolerant variety, a drought-tolerant variety, and farmers are happy and farmers are benefiting from these varieties. In the same way, when you come to the savanna zones, major of the crop areas by maize farmers are also to drought-tolerant and stress-tolerant varieties like Sanzasima, Wangdata, Opebro, Wambasik, which all possesses attributes of stress tolerance, including drought tolerance, striga tolerance, and also higher yields, and in some cases, early maturity. These varieties were released by local research institutions to help farmers to be more resilient. But we have to keep on and be able, as breeders, to provide farmers with more technology to replace old ones, and then also to address emerging issues. And it is what comes in most, is for us to quickly look at the breeding equation. as we were students, we were told. So you look at the breeding equation, you have the selection intensity, you have cycle time, you have selection accuracy, and then you have genetic variation. If only a breeder is able to reduce the breeding cycle time, then genetic gains will increase. And as breeders, we can only do this by employing more and more modern technologies, modern tools that makes our work go at a very fast rate. And then also that helps us to achieve a lot of efficiency. So I would like to share this also with you, as currently the tools that breeders are in breeders' hands and breeders are using to develop climate resilient maize varieties. So to be able to reduce the breeding cycle time, we need to use technologies that will give us high throughput, precision in field phenotyping. And then at variety development stages, we also need to cut down on the time that takes to develop, for instance, inbred lines. A good technology that has come to help is the double haploid technology, which helps breeders to save about 8 generations. You save 8 generations. You need just about 2 seasons to get your inbred lines fixed and for you to use them in your hybrid development activities. And you have also been fortunate to also come into the advances that come with genomic selection that assist breeders to be specific to their key traits, and in some cases to be specific to a gene of interest, to be able to target, select at higher efficiency, and then also at a higher accuracy. After all this is done, we need to be able to analyze the data that we have. We need to also do the data collection, analyze it, and be able to come out with the information that will help us make the decisions. And for some years now, there has been advances here. So this is just a pictorial presentation of what I just presented, from doing genomic selections, in bringing in with the double haploids, getting your inbred lines, doing backcrossing, doing the forward breeding activities, bringing in to testing at the on-station. And then also even at on-farm levels, there have been advances and new technologies and methods coming in, like the tripod approach that is coming in now. And even for seed production, where we have access to technologies that helps us to do quality control at a faster rate and a non-destructive mode. So there's been a lot of changes. There've been a lot of methods that are available to breeders all over the world. As I said, I talk about plant phenotyping technologies that aims at giving the breeder the best tools to come in to understand the environment in which the evaluation is being done, to understand the traits, and to be able to look at the effects of the environment on the traits and to be able to make a better decision. So in these cases, most of these technologies to us now are technologies that help with data collection. That helps with phenotyping in larger fields, well-prepared fields equipped with sensors, so that we could at a point in real time collect data and be able to understand what is happening. And that genomic selection, there have been a lot of advances with marker technology, molecular breeding technology that has come in to help with marker-assisted selections. And now even more advanced form of genomic selection, where you go in deep into specific genes, in specific traits, and then be able to do the selection at a faster space. Gene editing, which is very key and being used all over the world, but unfortunately in West and Central Africa, this is a bit, it is not more exploited in our zone. Talk about technology like transgenic approaches to introducing foreign genes into maize, which makes the process quite faster. It gives more efficiency. But then some countries do not have the rights per the legislature in their countries to even go into using some of these technology. And most of these technology more used in East and Central Africa, where we have the AATF projects, the Teller Maize and other projects coming in, because their legislature supports some of these. But then in West and Central Africa, there are a few countries that actually are assessing and exploring this. In breeding data management, there's been a lot of strife here, where breeding programs has been equipped with electronic data capture equipments. They've been equipped with softwares, and they've also been built in terms of capacity to be able to use these tools and to be able to make better decisions. Through the research and the review, I realized, as I said earlier, these technologies are more used and exploited in other regions of the world than in West and Central Africa. From the review, less than 0.1% of work done, breeding work done in West and Central Africa actually uses some of these modern technologies. I come in to just give a brief presentation of the work that we have done, especially to present a few that was supported by CIMMYT and then the Excellence in Breeding platform. So through the Excellence in Breeding platform, we were supported to do some genotyping using SNP markers, mid-density SNP markers, to do genetic diversity and population structure analysis. In 2024, the first assignment was done on 100 inbred lines that were drought and striga tolerant. And then also, quite recently, in 2020, another experiment was also done on 4 armyworm tolerant inbred lines and composites. And here, as I said, the interest was to do genetic diversity studies. And from the outcomes of these studies, we've been able, as a breeding program, been able to group our lines into heterotic groups. That is helping the judicious use of these lines in making process, developing new lines. And then also, we have been able to identify core sets that we are using to develop composites and populations to improve other maize genotypes that we have in our collection. Also, through the Excellence in Breeding program, we have been equipped with basic devices for data collection on the field. And then also, to enhance our plant phenotyping activities, we've been given label printers that helps us at a faster speed to print, tag our fields, and be able to even include barcodes. That makes it easier to make reference to what is happening on the field if you are looking at the data in the office. Introduction of these electronic devices in data capturing actually has made the data collection process shorter, makes it accurate, and then also makes it even, in some cases, easier to share and transmit data. The support didn't just end with the equipment. We also received a lot of training in breeding management system, which has been very helpful, where we have our own cloud that we could save the data, get onto the save our data, do analysis, design our experiments and everything. And aside breeding management systems, there has also been other trainings that has helped to shape the breeding activities of the institution. So as I said, there's been so much advances in terms of modern tools, as I presented earlier. And I also indicated that the adoption and use in West and Central Africa is very low. The question is, how are breeders in West and Central Africa acquiring and utilizing these modern tools? It was realized that most of these tools come into the national breeding programs through donor-funded projects, or in most cases, through projects that were coordinated by IITA, CIMIT, and then also through support from Excellence in Breeding platform, as I mentioned. What are the challenges that are affecting the adoption of these tools by breeders in West and Central Africa? I would like to add here that unlike the developed world, the temperate regions, where there's a lot of involvement of private sector in maize breeding activities and commercialization, in West and Central Africa, most of these breeding activities are done by the National Research Institution, which in turn collaborates with CIMIT and IITA in most cases because they are in our region and we get most of the support from them. But aside the supports that we receive from donors and from projects, there are key challenges that needs to be addressed if we will be able to use these tools, speed up our work, improve genetic diversity, and make meaningful impacts in the lives of our farmers and make our nations food secure. So the first thing is, these technologies are quite expensive at the initial stages, and then also when you would like to use or access them. I know for now, most national programs do not really concern themselves with setting up these facilities in their institutions. They rather rely more on outsourcing and getting the work done. But here, the challenge here is how to get funding to be able to access and use these technologies. And there's also high levels of technical and infrastructure incapabilities for most of the programs. Because most of these technologies, as I said earlier, are developed and used in other regions, especially in developed regions. It doesn't, in most cases, involve researchers and conditions in West and Central Africa. And therefore, when breeders intend to use these technologies, then they require to have some form of technical training to be able to use and use it efficiently. There's still a lot of legislative barriers in Africa, especially on the use of transgenic technologies, genetically modified varieties in country by farmers. And in this case, it limits the ability of the breeder to be able to use these technologies. For Nigeria and others that are lucky enough to have this done, their laws and legislation change, they are taking advantage. And Ghana is also on its way to be able to take advantage of this transgenic and be able to come in with more resilience varieties, especially for drought, for diseases like fall armyworm and pests like fall armyworm and others. So, as I said earlier, all these activities, if you go from the review, programs are able to access these new technologies only if a donor is funding or if they have a collaboration with an international institution, then they'll be able to do it. And it is because of the lack of or inadequate research funding dedicated to the work of breeders in the country. I've said a lot about legislative change, so I wouldn't spend much time on it again. But now, day in and day out, artificial intelligence is also becoming a very key component in modern technology and the application of modern tools. And big data is also coming in very strongly. We should prepare ourselves, train ourselves, and develop and to be able to access these technologies, even if they are not developed by us. But if they are made available, then we will be ready to accept and use them efficiently in our work. In conclusion, I would like to add that climate resilient crops are very key to ensuring food security of our nations. But we should also know that we have a client, we have our end users that determines what crop varieties will be adopted and used. There's been reports of farmers adopting or farmers abandonment of climate resilient varieties because the varieties doesn't meet their expectation. They underperform, and therefore they prefer going back to the varieties that we may term as not being resilient, as not being smart. But then, if what you are calling climate smart, climate resilient variety doesn't meet or is not able to compete favorably with what they have, then they would abandon them, which refers to a lot of loss in investments. As I said, there's also the need for change in government policies so that breeders will be able to access and then also use other technologies that deals more specifically to genetic modification, transgenics, and all that to enhance their work. To address all these problems and to avoid the situation where climate resilient crops are not used by farmers, we need to get on our toes and start working, developing our technical expertise, adopting existing technologies, and most especially collaborating with international scientists and counterparts, because it's through these collaborations that we'll be able to learn and bring in even expertise and technologies that are currently not available or used in our countries. Maize breeders and institutions must also be incentivized for their outputs. They should be encouraged to do more and to give out more, so that they will be able to come out with varieties that will make West and Central Africa and Africa as a whole food secure. I couldn't bring an exhaustive list of all the papers and research that were reviewed, but then I decided to include a slide on references to some of the papers that are directly cited or figures and that are directly cited in this presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Gloria. Very insightful. So we can open now for questions, and we have a question from Bodo. Bodo, you can unmute yourself, please, and ask the question to Gloria directly.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this overview presentation. It was very informative. Looking at your sources you have had or you have used for your analysis, I realized that this is basically exclusively material coming from the CGIAR from the past years. I see Prasanna Botupalli, the maize breeding lead at CIMMYT, and then Badu Apraku and Menkir, the maize breeding leads at IITA, as the major sources of this information. And as you may know, Gloria, for an independent presentation and for gaining an independent insight, information is needed from several sources, it's not just from one. So now we have a CGIAR opinion about this. And I wonder whether there are maybe other sources of information. For example, Ghana, the country, the government, the Ghanaian government, or the Ghanaian Ministry of Agriculture. Don't we have, let's say, inventories about the cropping of maize all across Ghana, about the varieties, about the releases of varieties over the years? Is there no statistics available? What do you think of the statistics provided by the FAO? And maybe there are other sources of information from other West African countries that could be used. I have a real deep interest in this because I sense it also here from my side. There is some information coming from the CGIAR breeders who have, of course, an interest to promote their work and to make it clear to everybody the size of the problem and also the size of the solutions. But I think it is important to have other sources. And they seem to be difficult to obtain. But maybe you and your colleagues who are on the ground and who are Ghanaians and may have access to this additional information that foreigners might not have access to, you could help there. It would be nice if you could reflect a little bit on that, the source of information. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much for the question. It's more of a suggestion. As I said, the references I cited or I presented on that slide is not exhaustive of the sources that were used during the preparation of the presentation. It's just those that I picked I included the figures and then the illustrations from. So those were the ones that I cited. You talked about whether there's data on the use of climate resilient varieties in Ghana and other countries. Yes, there is. And then in the presentation I mentioned, using Ghana as an example, that's for now the most popular locally released hybrid maize variety in Ghana. It's a stress-tolerant variety. And when you come to the northern zone of Ghana, we'd also have stress-tolerant varieties. released by the national programs that are also into using these varieties. And these
Yeah,
sources
thank
of information, you could get them from the TASAI website. You could get them also from the CSAT website. TASAI, that's assess variety use, variety release processes, and the different types of seed that are being promoted in the countries in Ghana, Nigeria, and other West and Eastern countries in Africa. So thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow up on this most important stress-tolerant variety that is grown in Ghana, which one is it and where does it come from? Who has bred it?
So most of these stress-tolerant varieties, as I mentioned, the national breeding programs of Ghana are parts of the CGIAR Center. Most especially, we work with IITA, and most of the germplasm that we use are from IITA and then also from CIMMYT. So the stress-tolerant varieties that I mentioned are all varieties that were released through the DTMA and then also now through the stress-tolerant maize project. So most of them are IITA genetics, and most of them are also from CIMMYT.
Thank you, Gloria. Bodo, do you want to extend the question, or we can pass to another questions?
Finish, thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any hand raised, so I will ask one question to Gloria. So you mentioned that the climate resilient varieties given to the farmers in Ghana are being abandoned by them. So could you extend a little bit more about that? Do you know any statistics or any reference for this, please?
No, I didn't say climate smart varieties are abandoned by farmers in Ghana. I said through the research and the review, there were claims that farmers abandoned climate resilient technologies and varieties because they do not suit their need. So that slide is actually a caution to breeders that even when you have the best intention of developing varieties that are climate resilient, you should also do well to consider end user preferences. You should also do well to come out to varieties that are very competitive. So of course, not all the varieties that has been released in Ghana, released in Nigeria, and as an example, are all being taken by farmers. But most of farmers, a larger number of a group of farmers are using stress-tolerant varieties that are coming from the research institutions and national breeding programs and their partners. So it was just a caution. It wasn't a direct situation as to what is happening in Ghana. So just a caution to all breeders to be mindful of what they come out with.
So Gloria, to extend this question and your answer, thank you for clarifying. So how can we change this situation, and how can we put the farmers to trust more the breeders and to adopt better varieties, or the varieties that we think that are better for that climate?
So now breeders will have to work more with their partners. So if you look at this illustration of the activities that goes on. So it is a whole chain from the trait discovery to inbred line development, variety development, testing, coming down to working with farmers, and then also even taking into consideration consumer preferences and other end-use preferences. So breeders are not supposed to work in isolation. At every step of the variety development process, they have to work with relevant key stakeholders so that as you showcase the varieties and you test the varieties with them, they'll be able to help you select those that answers their needs and those that are best and suit their own preferences. So now, through our involvement with the IITA and CIMMYT, we are now learning how to improve our breeding programs, doing our product profiles, defining the product profiles, defining market segments, and then also trying to also bring in a new tool to help us test this technology with farmers. So for some time now, we've been learning how to use the tripod approach in on-farm testing. And tripod just gives the breeder or the agronomist the chance to test new varieties with farmers at a faster pace, because you're able to engage more even when you don't have a lot of seeds. So these are all things that we need to consider in our breeding programs. Get the market segment defined, get the product profiles defined, and then you start your work. Once the varieties are developed, you test them with the appropriate stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. So I don't see any question either for Claudia or for Gloria. So if there is no more questions, I think this seminar came to the end. And we thank you very, very much for being with us and hope to see you in our next seminar. So our 8th seminar we will have Susan Treziger from CIMMYT to update us on her recent research on wheat, which will be introduced by Dr. Kevin Pixel also from CIMMYT. So thank you very much and see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much.